All right, we're going to talk about something really exciting today. We're going to be talking about how to do a technical stand-up. But don't stop watching the video, please. It's actually something that I think a lot of people don't do very well, and there's a lot of concepts and things that I can explain to really help make this very important movement much more robust and work at a much higher success rate for you. And it's going to help you with teaching it as well as being able to problem solve it, especially when you're working with students that are going to be struggling with it. So when we're talking about technical stand-up, we're talking about getting our hips up into the air and getting into a strong base that allows us to mobilize, to be able to get on top. This is something that we do at the end of every sweep. We do it in a lot of different defenses. You need to know how to do this well. So we're going to go over some of the different things that people make mistakes with. The first thing is obviously I got to bring my heel and foot, ankle underneath my knee to create a strong load-bearing frame. And I got to turn my body out to the side here and create a post at roughly a 45-degree angle so that I'm ready to absorb horizontal force that somebody's generating into me, which our opponent always will be. The mistake that a lot of people make here is that they have their knee back behind their ankle. And if that happens, this becomes accessible as a lever. So if I'm here and I'm trying to complete a technical stand-up, at any stage, Kevin can grab behind my heel and easily lift me off the ground. My center of gravity is too far back from my ankle, and because I don't have my knee above it, it's not a load-bearing frame. If I have my ankle underneath my knee here, if Kevin tries to pull my leg out right now, it's extremely difficult. He'll start moving me first. So as he's pulling, I'm going to be able to perform that technical stand-up, and I might even be able to arm drag him off of it. Make sure your knee is above your ankle. This arm has to be out roughly at a 45-degree angle. My chest has to be pointing out the same direction as my hips as well as my head. If this hand is too close to my body, it's a great frame to be able to absorb force from somebody falling on top of me from the sky, but that's not what's going to happen. So also I'm going to risk hurting my finger, so I'll turn my hand in for this example. As I try and perform a technical stand-up, if Kevin just drives into me very aggressively, I'm always going to get overwhelmed, even if this arm is framing at the right direction. This arm has to be out. And I want to have a straight line as straight as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect, from elbow to elbow or hand to hand or elbow to hand, so that if Kevin was to drive into me right now, I'm able to absorb a lot more force. If this hand comes in close, I'm going to fall over. And if my shoulders fall offline, then it doesn't become a strong frame. So if I'm here like this framing Kevin, but my shoulders become more concaved, he's going to be able to redirect me. Or another common mistake, and it's a scarier one, is as I'm framing, see how there's a straight line relatively from wrist to wrist? If Kevin leans all his weight onto me right now, I can absorb it pretty easily. It's my bones that are doing most of the work. If my shoulders fall offline like this, he's going to now start driving force back through my right shoulder and knock me down to the dead angle. Or even worse, as we fall off here, if the force keeps going into my left shoulder, you can see how my arm starts going behind my back and my shoulder becomes into this really twisted position. I risk injuring myself. So we got to make sure, foot underneath the knee, turn myself out, I have everything pointed that same direction. I don't have to be looking at my opponent. I know exactly where he is. So whether it's a collar tie or me just framing here, a gi grip, framing him out like this, I could turn my neck slightly if you wanted to. It's not really the end of the world, but I am twisting my spine up. I know where he is. I can see him with my peripherals. I can feel him. I'm going to be able to lift my hips now and bring my leg back. Now, every time I move my hips back, my knee will start to go behind my ankle. I want to be very careful, and I want to be withdrawing that leg with me immediately. Sometimes you'll be really close still, and you'll be able to just keep yourself in the proper position. That is preferred. But if you end up having to move your hips back, bring that foot with you. Another important thing is that this knee now has to post at a roughly similar direction, the angle of my hand. So right now I have my arm at roughly a 45-degree angle. If I bring my knee and I put it right here, it's pointing straight up and down. And so right now, if Kevin's driving into me, as soon as I take my left arm out, I'm going to get overwhelmed because I don't have a post at the same force vector to take over. Our leg has to be ready to take over for our arm. So here, I have to bring that knee further back, and that's where my knee starts to withdraw a little bit behind my ankle. So I bring it here. Because now my knee is at a pretty good angle here, as Kevin's leaning all his weight into me, as I take my arm away, I'm strong. And I'm going to be able to absorb that force. And now I'm able to start turning myself back towards Kevin and getting myself into strong combat base, which is live toes. As soon as I start turning that angle, if I do all this work with good base and then start going dead toes here, I'm still in a pretty strong position, but he's going to be able to overwhelm me. I'm not going to be able to actually absorb as much force, but even worse, I'm not going to be able to apply force. We want to be able to start turning this into an offensive cycle where I'm going to be able to start turning the battle back into my favor. It's where we don't like to do the technical stand-up like this because it puts my shoulders quite in front of my hips like this, and so my center of gravity is shifted. I'm weaker, and because of this posture break here, even if I keep myself relatively straight, I can't generate much force. Kevin's gonna be able to access my spine as a lever, and if there's strikes in a self-defense situation, it's even more dangerous. So as I'm here, framing Kevin in whatever way, like this, I'm in proper alignment initially. Now from here, I lift my hips and I withdraw my left leg, and my knee matches the direction of my arm. Bring my foot back underneath my knee here. Now I can release, and I got a strong tripod still, where I have 4 points now to 3 points, because I have my knee, foot, live toes, and this foot in contact. So as Kevin's trying to drive into me, I can now drive back. And now as I turn myself and I start to lift, because I'm live toes, I'm going to be able to do multiple different things, whether it's snap downs into front headlocks or just standing back up and threatening with other takedowns, falling back into sweeps if you really wanted to. The choice is yours because you're in proper base. So as I'm in this position, go through it one more time. Technical stand-up, whatever means you're doing it with, it's got to be very similar. Even if it's off the elbow, similar thing. Force vectors at the right angle. As Kevin's driving into me, I'm able to start bringing that foot back, bringing my foot underneath my knee best I can, build up to my hand, and then I start angling myself so that now I'm going to be able to drive force into him. I want to turn those toes back out because my opponent is right here, and I want to point my hips and all my weapons towards him so that now, whether it's just standing up or moving immediately into any kind of offensive movements that I want, I'm able to. The other important thing with a technical stand-up is to realize that it is a tactical retreat. My hips are backing up. This is what allows me to deal with an opponent who's driving a lot of weight into me and becomes like an immovable object and still be able to get up. So there's a big difference between, if you just move over a bit, Kevin, big difference between this, where look at my hips, where they are, and it backs up, versus this kind of rocking up technical stand-up where my hips are here and I rock forward. This does not have any base behind me, and because I'm moving forward, if I'm dealing with somebody that isn't going to move, or it's going to be very difficult to move, I'm just going to hit a wall, and I'm not ever going to be able to get up. And I'm not going to be able to drive into Kevin, because Kevin's going to be in base, even if he's not trying to, just because he's here and he's not moving. As I try and rock up, there's nothing behind me. I'm always going to drop. But this allows me to support Kevin as he's driving into me, and because I'm not, even here with base behind me, if I tried to move forward, it's going to be extremely difficult to do so. So I actually back my hips up. And by realizing that difference of that tactical retreat, it's going to, hopefully you're not going to mix up the two technical stand-ups, because that's something that I always deal with beginners, is they always want to rock up like this, because it's quite easy and it's quite quick. Nothing wrong with that at the proper time. Marcelo Garcia does this all the time. If I'm completing a sweep and Kevin's falling, and I know that Kevin has no base, no ability to fight back as he's falling, I can hitchhike with the energy of him falling, and I can rock up with that. That's how Marcelo Garcia uses that stuff a lot. So if I do something like stands and I do a double ankle sweep, there's a point where as Kevin's falling, where I can rock right up with him. Excellent in those moments. If it's not that, if there's ever a time where you're like, I don't know if he's going to be fighting back or he's going to be able to generate some force into me, then the other technical stand-up's going to be much safer. And there has been circumstances in competition and in rolling with Marcelo Garcia, and this is not to take anything away from him because he's one of the best, if not the best grappler of all time, that he tries to come up to his feet and he ends up getting driven back over because his opponent does a great job of posting their hands on the mat or doing something that they can generate a bit of base and drive back into him. And in that moment, he doesn't have enough base to be able to absorb that force and to be able to fight back against it. And he has to go back down to his butt and then start working sweeps again. So sometimes it's much better for us to look to complete a sweep. So if I do that double ankle again, where as I knock Kevin down, I control both legs, I post my elbow onto the mat, and now I can post my foot underneath my knee. And as Kevin's trying to get up from here, I'm able to deny him base while making sure I get into very strong base myself with that technical stand-up, proper combat base. And now I can start to make sure I finish that pass. It's slower, but it's more systematic, which then makes it safer. It's gonna give you a higher success rate. So these are just some things that I see very commonly done wrong with the technical stand-up. And if you're still watching this video, I hope you guys enjoyed it.